Hi, welcome to Link and Learn by Padua Communications. I'm doing a recording because we had a blackout and I was thrown off the internet. Hopefully this will make sense. If you've got any questions, then come on back to me. So just to recap who I am, I'm Nikki Rudd. I'm Managing Director of Padua Communications. We're a content marketing and PR agency founded in 2009, so we're 13 this month. We work predominantly with B2B businesses, although we do have some B2C ones as well. We've worked across lots of different industry sectors, and we basically help businesses tell stories for long-term brand awareness and short-term sales campaigns. And as I mentioned, they're across lots of different industries. And the reason that I wanted to do this talk is because although my business, an agency, is 13 years old, actually, I've worked in an agency now for 26 years of one variety or another. So I've worked in large agencies, I've worked in small ones, and I just thought it would be really useful to take this as a topic. It's a bit off from some of the Link and Learn topics that we normally do because they tend to be a bit more focused on marketing channels or marketing activities. But I just think if you've never worked with an agency before, or you're thinking about it, or you're absolutely swamped in-house and you're thinking, God, I don't know, is there another way? Then maybe this might give you a bit of an insight about what it's like being agency side. So in this session, we are going to shine a light on what it's like working with an agency and what activities are good to outsource. So agency life. Just to give you a bit of background, so I mentioned I've worked in different agencies for sort of 26 years. There are a lot of agencies. When I first set my business up, I went to a thing called Business Link, which was kind of still funded by the government. And I remember the person saying, you know, are there lots of agencies or, you know, businesses like the one that you're thinking of starting? And I thought, oh my God, there's like so many of them. And he said, oh, actually, if there are, then there's a real need. And there are a lot of agencies, large and small. They all do different things and they do them differently. So hopefully there will be some tips in here about kind of if you are thinking about outsourcing stuff, what you might need to consider for, so which agency you work with. Generally in the marketing world, an agency will be sort of brand design focused agency. So they'll work on kind of, they'll have designers as part of their sort of team, and that will be their main sort of focus. Or there'll be a digital marketing agency. So they'll be doing kind of social and social marketing and stuff like that, and with a bit of design. In the comms world, there's more of a kind of social marketing digital agency. So, agencies that basically help you run your social media channels, and traditional PR agencies, which are sort of focused more on media relations and reputation management. Although I have to say there has been a blurring, and sometimes you might get a PR agency that does a bit of marketing and a bit of digital, or you might have a kind of a design agency that basically does kind of marketing and events, for example. Hand on heart, I don't think I've really come across an agency like Padua Communications, because when I set up, my background is in PR, but you can't do decent PR unless you have an understanding of kind of decent marketing. So I set it up to be a sort of hub agency, talking about content as being the sort of backbone of sort of the output, whether it be for sort of sales and marketing or whether it be for PR. So I kind of feel like we were right at the kind of front of the curve when it came to kind of content marketing as an idea. Depending on the size of the agency, there may be fairly rigid billing structures. So if you are sort of thinking about how much you might want to spend, some agencies offer a certain amount of flexibility. We, as Padua, which I'll say with my hat on, but we basically do a kind of, we have some clients on retainers, we have some clients who basically work with us on particular campaigns or on sort of specific one-off projects. But depending on the size of agency, that changes, and also depending on the nature of work that an agency will do as well. Some agencies are what is called full service. So that means that they basically offer everything and they do everything for you. But others are specialists in certain areas. So we, for example, at Padua, we offer quite a wide breadth of services, but there are certain things that we don't do. For example, we don't do PPC ad campaigns, but we have got somebody within our network that we would highly recommend and, sort of put you in contact with. And sometimes the agency might manage that relationship, or it might actually be that, they just introduce you in and that's a direct link. So yes, some agencies work on projects, others work on retainer and or projects. It's worth asking the question when you are looking at who you want to work with about how flexible sort of they are on fees and kind of how they approach that work as well. So working with an agency is all about collaboration, and it's about building trust. You have to trust that the agency is working on your behalf and understand your business and isn't going to, for example, if you're a PR agency, throw you features for publications that just aren't on your radar, that aren't relevant to your customers and kind of, sort of to kind of where you want to be or how you want to be seen. So you do need to know that the agency will do best for you, but there is a learning curve. Some agencies are very, very good at getting up to speed with kind of what you want and your aims very quickly. Some will possibly sort of be a bit standoffish and take the time and wait for kind of briefs to come in. So depending on sort of how you want to work and the kind of person you are and kind of business that you are, that's probably worth kind of having a think about as well. And you can't expect an agency to basically sort of hit the ground running and know your business inside and out within a couple of days. What we do at Padua is we do a kickoff session for most of the clients we work with, and we do them actually if we're working with some clients, which we have done for a very, very long time. Every couple of years we will do that sort of session. We're obviously speaking to them all the time, but kind of just to make sure that actually what you're offering is really tying into with those sort of longer term marketing aims or business aims. So, where the senior management team want to be, a few years down the line, not just kind of what's going on in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, for example. There is a massive differentiator, I think, between agencies on how proactive or how reactive they are. So that's worth, when you're choosing which agency you might want to work with, just trying to get a kind of feel for whether they will actually so just do what you've asked them to do and what you're going to be paid for, and everything else is going to be extra. And there are some agencies that are like that, or whether actually, you're working with an agency and they are thinking of themselves as a long-term collaborator. Usually, if it's a larger agency, the person responsible for pitching to you and winning your business is there for that bit. And then your account gets handed over to an account team. Where that person who was kind of responsible for kind of winning the business and getting all the briefs and all the rest of it is kind of, it might be there for a little bit, but it isn't. And traditionally that team structure is kind of an account executive as a junior person, an account manager, an account director, an associate director, and then senior and junior in between there, sort of sandwiched in. And so basically that again is worth asking up front about kind of, who is going to be working on your account, who's going to be your main point of contact, who, if things are going kind of a bit pear-shaped, you can kind of flag stuff to. We have a thing in Padua where when we do that sort of kickoff session, it's usually done with me because I do quite a lot of the creative strategy for clients, but we have a kind of a production schedule where we kind of put notes in and kind of share information around. But it's worth checking because we had, for example, an example of a client this week who's working with an agency where they feel, it was a design agency, they feel like actually they've just been pushed to the bottom, that actually that sort of a junior designer is doing all the work, and they've actually, instead of it being a kind of fun creative project which you're hoping it would be, actually it's kind of really driving the client mad because they feel like they're having to actually go back and they're going to have to kind of push it up to the senior team to actually get the results that they wanted, which obviously nobody really wants that. You want kind of, to be able to work and it be fun and creative and kind of, that there is a real partnership there. So an account team, depending on the budget and kind of the setup, an account team can be working on several different accounts across different markets any one time, can be made of different numbers of people depending on kind of what's needed on that account. So you might have, I used to work for a much larger agency, and there was a department that worked on kind of corporate brand, there was one that worked on kind of just media relations, there was one that worked on kind of digital, and then those people also talk to each other. Actually, they didn't. One of those things of a learning for when you set up your own business, but actually there were different people, sort of different specialisms within. So again, depending on kind of what you want your agency to be doing and how much money you've got to spend, it's worth having that conversation up front. Because actually, if you can get that kind of partnership and that collaboration right from the start, and that transparency, it just makes the kind of relationship sort of a bit more seamless, faster, and that's really quite key. The other thing as well to say about an agency is, if you're working with an agency, the more notice you can give them for planning, the better, because they will need to plan work in. You know, different people are working on different accounts. It's not like in-house where you've got this. So if you think of, for example, how many meetings you have in a week, and then you think of kind of somebody working in an agency, they will, if they're working on 4 accounts, they will probably have 4 times the amount of meetings that you've got. So, you know, you have to kind of, if you can give kind of enough heads up about where you want to be and what assets you might need, or then that's actually really, really good. That flow of information should be sort of two-way, and there should be some transparency there as well. So the benefits of working with an agency, in my opinion, obviously I own one, but are massive, and they include you get leading edge thinking from a team of collaborators with different skill sets. So quite often, if you're working with you've got a marketing team, but there's only a few of you in there, you know, sort of depending on the level of experience, you've got that pool of, you know, sort of experience and kind of knowledge. But actually, if you're working with an agency, you've got loads more people to sort of pull off of. And also you get people who are working and sharing their knowledge from working on different accounts and different markets and different ways of working. So actually that sort of pool of knowledge that you can pull on is much wider. You get someone apart from an in-house marketing team who can ask difficult questions. So this is really useful if you as a marketing manager or marketing director are thinking, God, I want to challenge the senior management team without thinking, because that's just not going to work. Or you are maybe a marketing person in an SME and you're working directly with the business owner, and you're thinking, he doesn't or she doesn't understand this, and actually how am I going to approach it, because I'm actually in a junior role. And actually, if you're working with an agency, they can sometimes be pulled in to be the external people who go, why are you doing it that way? Or, oh, I thought you meant that. I heard that particular tagline meant something completely different to me, you know. So you get kind of like backup to actually sort of help you. You get an external pair of eyes from outside the business. I mentioned about that kind of seeing things sort of freshly. Sometimes I think we're all creatures of habit, and we can be working on the day-to-day like this, and it's quite hard sometimes to sort of look up and have kind of somebody go, yes, this is a fresh way of doing things, or, you know, so we're going to this event and we need some new ideas. And working with an agency, you've just got, it makes your team a bit more dynamic because you've got extra people kind of putting ideas in. You get a mix of skill sets. Usually this is great because obviously that pool of experience and the rest of it. Sometimes it can really backfire because of the, you know, sort of you might have somebody who is thinking in a particular way, and, you know, you might feel that actually that there's just a lack of understanding in kind of how you as a business or an organization is set up or works, or kind of what your key messaging are. So if that happens, it's worth kind of flagging it with kind of whoever was your kind of first point of contact, because it might be that actually that person just doesn't gel with you, and that there might be somebody else in the business that can actually be put on your account and kind of, you know, work with you. The thing to think about with working with an agency is that on the whole, agencies want the in-house marketing team to look good. You know, we want to make you look better. So actually that proactive and kind of like fresh ideas and everything else is actually a real bonus. And often you get senior experience at the fraction of the cost of having it in-house. So particularly if you're a junior team and you're thinking, God, I've got to do strategy and I've never done it before, you could speak to an agency about just coming and helping work on that, and know that you've got that experience, and somebody will ask those questions and really kind of steer you, and then disappear off, and, you know, then you can carry on with just doing the implementation. It's working with an agency gives greater flexibility, and projects tend to get started on the whole faster, and also management time of them is sort of less. And what I mean by that is that if you're giving somebody a job and you're paying them to do that job, then they will just get on with it. Whereas actually, if you think about kind of sometimes in an organization, you can have an awful lot of internal politics, or actually there's lots of people who've got to sign off on stuff. And that's not to say that still doesn't happen, but it just means that you could get sometimes a bit further down the road before you have to get that kind of input and kind of sign off and the sort of the brakes on. So sometimes it can really buoy up how you work as an organization. You pay for what you get so long as you're working with the right agency, so or person with experience. So work can be turned around quite quickly because, again, you've got a larger pool of people that you can pull on. And as long as you are quite clear with kind of what you want and kind of, giving a decent brief and kind of really having that communication and it being two-way and being open for questions, all the rest of it, that agency will really work on your behalf for you. And it's fun and creative. Actually, I would say if you're having marketing meetings with an agency and they're not fun and creative, then you're not working with the right people. So it's good. It's dynamic. It's a real sort of partnership. So I mentioned the collaboration so that partnership is absolutely key. The communication between an agency and a client is sometimes really difficult to manage if you don't understand how the agency setup works. So when you're thinking about working with an agency, I mentioned about that, asking who's going to be working on your account team, but also ask about billing procedures, ask about kind of whether expenses are included or not. Agencies need to remain flexible. So you can't just think, I'm going to ring them and they'll all be there at the desk, because actually they are phenomenal jugglers of work. All the agency people that I've ever worked with, they're like absolute genius at multitasking and keeping, the plates on sticks turning. And the reason that agencies need to be flexible is if there is a situation that arises, there's a certain amount of flux. So, for example, if an account team is working with sort of a client and the CEO walks out, or there's a death of a senior management team, for example, or there's a sustainable disaster, like an environmental disaster, if it's a waste management plant or something like that, then actually there's all of a sudden a whole series of kind of activity that needs to happen to manage that. Messaging out, the PR side of things, there's a huge amount of work that all of a sudden you might need to kind of just go, I can't work on this account because this is actually more important. So you're very, very kind of good at switching between kind of markets and clients and stuff that needs doing. Or there might be a national issue, for example, the death of Queen Elizabeth II. All of a sudden, actually, we've got 12 clients that we're working with at the moment, and we had, sort of emails out to all 12 of them saying, what do you want to do? Do you want to have something on your website? Do you want to, let's stop all your social media, let's review what's on there. And so there's a certain amount of kind of flex in the kind of work that you're doing. If you're offering a PR service, you're working with an agency and they're doing PR for you, make sure that you give them enough time. What I mean by that is, for some publications, there might be a really long lead time. So actually, from pitching in a story, a coverage might not appear for 6 weeks afterwards, for example, if it's a printed publication. But also, actually, you're dealing with a very sort of set structure within a publication. So it's not just a case of okay, we've sent our press release and that's it, they're going to cover it. Actually, if it's somebody really doing a decent PR job for you, then they are sort of working out who they need to speak to within a publication, how they're going to change the angle of the story so that it fits within actually a publication sort of guidelines, if you like, or kind of opportunities. Quite often you're having to kind of try and pitch the idea in, you're having to do it several times because obviously journalists get absolutely thousands of media pitches all the time. So you need to be given time. You can't just sort of think, oh yes, the media pitch has gone in, have we got any coverage yet? It takes a while. I mentioned about not being able to expect to just catch your team on the off chance, and I mentioned about meetings. So what I would say is having a regular catch-up time is good for sort of some agencies, and we always use ours to kind of have a catch-up about what's going on and also use it for kind of future planning. But it's worth checking because if you end up having several of those meetings, we do that for clients, but actually a lot of agencies would bill that time, or will take that time off the amount of time that you pay as part of your kind of monthly retainer, if you like. So it's worth again asking upfront about how that is handled with the agency that you're thinking of working with. So just having a think about how you choose your agency, I would say it's more about, even before you reach out, it's identifying what you need the help with. So do you need help with strategy or implementation, or both? Is the agency you're thinking of working with, does it align with your brand values? What do you think of them as a company? Be clear about your aim. So, if you can, be really, really tight with the brief that you give. and also how you're going to measure the results, how often you're expecting to have kind of updates. Have a think about what specialist skills are needed. Do you have a skills gap in-house that you think, God, I just need an agency that can help me do this bit of work? So we've got, with some of the clients that we work with other agencies, but we also work with, for example, heads of marketing that might have kind of marketing team in-house, but they haven't got the kind of content writing specialism, or they might not have the PR specialism. And so we just bolt in and do that bit. So if you can identify kind of what you really want help with, that's much better. You can work out what agency you want to work with, but also what specialist skills that agency needs to have. How much budget do you have? How much experience does the agency have? Now, what I mean by that is not necessarily do they already work with clients in your industry. Just as an example, in the last 13 years, we've worked with huge amount of industries. I think about 60, 70 industries with clients, sort of across that sort of space. And some of them, there is a bit of a kind of, yes, okay, well, I know that. So, we've worked with these software companies and actually we understand the hardware bit, for example, or we understand cloud, or, but actually on the whole, if you're working with an agency, it's their job to get up to speed with kind of what's going on in your market and who your competitors are and how you're going to basically differentiate yourself so that they can add in extra value with that. So don't necessarily think, oh my God, they've never worked in this industry before. It's not that. It's more about, actually when you're thinking about your account team and who's going to be working on it, who's working on it, what kind of experience have they got? Also ask what's the staff churn of the agency, because the last thing you want is to basically build up a kind of relationship and then basically that person disappear off because they've gone to a competitor or something like that. So it's worth just asking to see, actually, is this a good agency? Has it got a good vibe? Do people stay there a long time? I mentioned about asking who'll be on your account team, but also check in about reporting, what's going to work for you. If you've got to give, this is actually an example of something that we did for a client, but if we know that, a head of marketing has got to give an update every quarter into the board about what's going on, then we basically make sure that the report and all that information is there for them to make that job easier for them. So check in about reporting, what works for you. That might be that it's a quarterly, sort of branded report. But actually, if you're like, well, I know that every Friday night, I want to have my fun call on Friday night where I know exactly what's going on and what kind of week it's been. Let's book in, half an hour of time. That's fine. But you need to have kind of that conversation up front about, is that actually extra or is it included? And can the agency work with that? I mentioned about what's the agency vibe and how transparent, how open it is. So probably one of the best examples of this is quite often when, sort of a new bit of business is coming in, an agency will say to you, so have you got an idea of budget? They're not necessarily thinking, hurrah, I'm going to spend all of the budget that you just said, but it's so that they can basically get a real understanding of, this is for the skills that you're needing, what's going to be our best recommendations and who's going to work on it and how that's going to hang together. So that kind of communication and that transparency it's not a game. It's not a kind of, actually I'm only going to give you this if you can give this. It's more of a, and I say this as a business owner, if I'm asking that question, it's so that I can actually give you something that's going to meet your needs rather than something that's way off right from the start. But also what I'd say as well is try and get an idea of kind of what the agency vibe, what do you think they're going to be like to work with? Ask if you can speak to some other customers of theirs and what they'd say about them, see if they've got some reviews. Because actually you want to make sure that you've got, and I mentioned the brand values, but actually you want to make sure that it's a good relationship, it's a positive relationship. The last thing you want is to be working from an agency point of view with a client who's basically just not happy, but also from a client's point of view, you want to work with an agency that is helpful and there for you, not somebody that you're having to kind of prod the stick to actually get to do anything. How easy can you ask questions? How open do you feel the agency or the account team is with you? That's, I think, probably a good kind of test of kind of what the DNA is like of an agency. And does the agency understand your market? And as I said earlier, if they've never worked in that market, it's not an absolute sort of deal breaker because they can learn that. quite quickly. And actually, one of the things particularly about agencies, but I would say particularly about PR agencies or anybody with PR experiences, you are used to sifting through a huge amount of information to make sure that you actually are then able to distill the key points of a story. So yeah, don't worry too much if if they haven't worked in that industry before, but if they've got the passion for it, then actually that you're kind of halfway there. So just a quick note on great jobs to outsource. Content writing, stuff for case studies, ebooks, web copy, blog posts. If you haven't got a copywriter in-house or somebody who's quick at writing or can do it, but it's going to take forever and a day, they are great jobs to actually be able to kind of outsource to an agency. Media relations, in particular from a PR point of view, sort of being able to handle a campaign and then pitch it out and feedback to you. Events of all sorts, shapes and sizes from start to finish. If it's a really, really massive event, then it may well be that you go to a specific event organisation agency. But on the whole, I would say, that most agencies have thought about events and are pretty good at kind of planning them and from start to finish. Graphic design, again, great to outsource. Most agencies have got a pool of designers that they would work with. Our main designer that we work with is based between Bournemouth and Brazil, but he's almost like the backbone, to be fair, on a lot of the work that we do. Website builds, great thing to outsource. Again, I'll come on to kind of billing for those and how the fees might work, but that is it's a kind of set project. If you can package something up as this is what I want, then actually they're a pretty good job to give to an agency to do. Ad campaigns, again, the ad design bit, the actual managing of it, that's a really good job to do. I've put here award entry writing. That is also, it's a massive job because there are so many awards, and each one, obviously, if you're writing an award entry, you want to kind of make sure that you hit all the criteria. But again, if you know that there are specific awards that you want to do, or you're not too sure, but you want an agency to do some research for you and come up with some suggestions, there is a way of doing that. And actually, that is, again, something that can be sort of packaged up. Video production, again, can be done. A lot of stuff can be done, obviously, on these, particularly for sort of social media. But if you're doing kind of proper videos and actually you're really thinking about the brief and working with an agency who's got experience of doing that and who will ask you stuff, I guarantee if you've not done video before, they will make you think, and you'll think, God, I didn't even consider that. So that whole kind of like input into how you think about campaigns and the messaging and how things are going to be seen, particularly if it's a visual, working with designers and videographers or an agency that's got that element of it is absolutely great. And media training as well, again, sort of package. But if you know that you've got crisis comms program, or you want some key spokespeople just to be kind of up to encouraged to be up to speed about how they come across, then again, that's a great project to do. Great jobs for in-house. Social media engagement. Now, I say that because we do some social media for clients because we're obviously doing content and social media comes from that. But actually, the time that it takes to actually do the engagement with, I think, is much better off done in-house. CRM management and list building, apart from the whole GDPR malarkey, having somebody who's responsible for the database and updating it and mapping customer journeys and keeping that, I think, again, is a great job for in-house. It can be outsourced, as can social media engagement, but I think if you've got somebody in-house who's got that skill, then actually that's quite great. Likewise, website performance analytics. Now, you might work with a web agency who might build the site and who might set it all up and the rest of it and might feed into it. But if you've got somebody who is in-house who's making sure that your website is, sort of up to speed, and you can see and use the information from the insights and the analytics that something like Google Analytics is giving you, then again, in-house, I think that's a perfect job for somebody to do. Likewise, email marketing. So you might have somebody who writes all the content for you, but that whole kind of tagging and managing and kind of campaign and testing which one is, whether it's an A or a B that gets more opens and the rest of it. If you've got somebody in-house who does that, then that's again a great job. All of these things, I could say they could be outsourced to the right agency, but I think if you've got a marketing person in-house and that's their job or part of their job, then actually it's probably a bit more value and a bit more responsive if it's in-house. Research for case studies and product focuses. So what I mean by this is, when as an agency, we usually have kind of the person in marketing as our main point of contact, but really their role is sort of signposting and possibly project managing. Sort of if there's a case study, for example, here's the details, I'll introduce you in, hand it over, get it written quickly, and the rest of it, come back in, approve. So the in-house bit is more about the ties in with the marketing strategy for the business of kind of, what assets need doing, what assets would be useful, and liaising with different people in the organization to work that out and then brief an agency. Food for thought for reward entry. So I mentioned about the kind of writing it and doing the research for it, but it may well be that, again, somebody in-house has a much better idea of this particular customer success story and how it might fit in with something. So again, that collaboration and communication is absolutely key, but it's good if you've got somebody in-house actually sort of highlighting areas of things that are needed. Liaison with the sales team and the senior management team. As an agency, you can do that, but actually what I think of when I think about Padua and how we do that is how we help marketing managers be able to do that better for the agencies where we're working with the marketing team. So it's like having an extension of your marketing team so that you can basically do your job more effectively. Outlining marketing assets. So we've sort of said about that kind of, what marketing or sales assets are needed, and also project management. So being the point of contact that kind of manages the agency, feeds some stuff in, gets on with the day job, doing stuff and having to do all the meetings and all the other many things that marketing has to do. And then basically step back in and having the agency kind of report back in so that it all works seamlessly together. So I'm just going to pick back here about reviewing activity. It's worth, when you're working with an agency or when you're even starting, checking what the notice period is. The reason I say this is because for some agencies, the notice period can be quite long. Ours isn't, I have to say, and there is a reason for that, because I think actually it's just a waste of money. If you've decided that actually an agency isn't working for you, I don't mean not doing the work, I mean it's just not working with you in the way that you thought it was going to be. The worst thing you can do, I think, as an agency is know that you've basically still got to do some client, but they're going to get rid of you. So I think just checking what that notice period is, or how easy it is to step in, step out of contracts, how flexible it is to be able to work with the agency is quite key. Ask for review meetings that suit you. If you're tasked with a quarterly review for your boss, ask your agency to support you. I'm going to need this for this date. Is that going to be doable as part of the fee? If you're not happy with the work, give the agency a chance to sort it, particularly if you're just starting out. So I mentioned about the learning curve, but quite often, it's all working with people. It's all working with an agency is a lot about relationships. So if you're not happy with the work that you're getting, if you flag it with the person that actually brought you in as a client and say, I'm not happy or I don't feel like I've got it, then give them a chance, because actually it might be that actually that person is going through a whole load of other things and actually is just not performing at the best. And although that's not ideal, actually we're all just human. So I would say before just ditching an agency, give them a chance to sort it out. Not, months. You should be able to flag it and feel like your problems or your issues are being responded to. But I would say, there is, again, it's about relationships. And even if you think about how you get on with kind of, other people within your network, or might be other people within your organization, sometimes there is a bit of friction and you have to sort of work your way around it. If your account is being handled by a junior team and you feel you are managing them, bring that up with the account director or the agency owner, because actually by working with an agency, they should be providing value to you. You shouldn't have to kind of keep pointing things out that you are, paying for agency experience and a skill set for. So, if you're not happy, I would, if any of our clients are not happy, it doesn't happen very often, touch wood here, but I think everybody would know that they could actually flag it with us or come and find myself or Jason, my business partner, to say, actually, we'd like to do that differently, or is there a way of working this around? And so that kind of, sort of communication and kind of openness is quite key. And sometimes partnerships end. That's part of agency life. If a team member leaves and you feel there isn't an adequate replacement put in place, or bring it to the agency's attention, see what they put in place before making any rash decisions. But sometimes that is just what happened. And I can honestly say that I think if you're a proactive agency, or you're working with a proactive agency, that collaboration and that relationship, can stay, and can remain for a long, long time. But there needs to be that kind of still creative input. And it's something that we work very, very hard at in Padua. So, we have got clients that we've worked with for sort of 11, 12 years, we've got some that work for 7 years. But we're always trying to sort of move with kind of being able to flex with what their business aims are, and offer different things. And also, I think, again, it's not necessarily always about the kind of subject matter. It's about the openness and the kind of willingness to learn and to kind of flex what you might be doing as an agency so that it meets what a client's needs are. Fees. Now then, when an agency drafts a proposal, there'll be many ideas in there and options of costs, often based on an annual fee, particularly if you're on a retainer. But there should be a billing setup that works for you. So if you've got a quarterly PO, then the agency should be able to work with that. If you've got kind of POs for each campaign, ask. There will be a way around that. And if that's how you want it to be costed for you in your proposal, the best thing you can do is actually ask up front that that's actually what an agency does. For certain activities, including PR and event management, a longer term project or would be better, or a longer term fee would be better, just because of the timelines that I mentioned earlier about kind of, from when you're starting to pitch something into a publication and how long it actually takes before something might appear, which is no fault of the agencies. It's just sometimes the very nature of actually that's what's in the feature, or what the publication is focusing on, or if it's got a kind of key topic or something like that. For website work, the fees are often split across a project with a deposit, then a mid-term payment, and then a cost on completion. And actually, for some agencies, getting a deposit for certain pieces of work can really help cash flow, because there might be a kind of first and a second kind of payment. And the reason for both of those is that sign-off can take a long time. So I mentioned I'd worked with agencies for 26 years, but there are certain pieces of work that you as an agency could work on, and then it has to go round the houses for completion. And particularly if you've paid, sort of a designer, if that's sort of an additional cost for you as an agency, for example, they may well send their invoice in actually while this is still being approved, or the content still being approved. So depending on how the agency works, it's worth asking that up front again about kind of how rigid the fee structure is, what sort of flex there are, what's going to work for your sort of procurement, if you like, of those services. And that's it. So hopefully that's given you an idea of some things to sort of think about if you've never worked with an agency before, or you're kind of, you're considering it, or you're considering outsourcing some of the marketing or the PR work, and you're sort of not sure. If you've got any questions at all and I haven't answered them, please get in contact with me at nikki@paduacommunications.com. And hopefully we'll see you at the next Link and Learn. They are held on the second Tuesday of every month, 11 a.m. You can book online at the website at paduacommunications.com/events. The 2023 programme of Link and Learn is being worked on currently, and the next session is in December. It's going to be a bit of a kind of informal, let's have a look at some of the stuff that has worked this year and some of the stuff that we can take as learnings for 2023. Thank you very much.